I spotted Sarah first, stepping off the Vegas flight, her red dress bright under the terminal lights. Then I saw him, Brian, waiting at the gate, pulling her into a kiss, deep and unapologetic, for everyone to see. My son, Ben, grasped my hand, asking why Mommy was hugging that man. The casual cruelty of it, public and absolute, left me standing there, empty-handed, a fool. The September morning held a deceptive clarity, air crisp and cool, sunlight painting sharp angles across the bedroom floor. Mark leaned against the doorframe, watching Sarah pack. Her large suitcase lay open on the bed, disgorging a careful selection of clothes and accessories. She moved with an efficiency that felt new, a focused energy he hadn't seen directed at mundane tasks in years. A flash of scarlet caught his eye. Sarah pulled a dress from a garment bag, shaking it out. It was a sequined red number, short and undeniably flashy. Mark had never seen anything like it in her closet, nor had he ever imagined her choosing something so bold. A set of delicate, high-end lace lingerie, still in its tissue paper, followed, tucked almost surreptitiously beneath a silk camisole. He noticed a faint, almost mechanical lilt to her laugh when she spoke to herself, a sound that felt just a beat off key. He pushed off the frame, stepping closer. Planning on starting a new life in Vegas, he joked, picking up the sequined dress by its thin strap. The material felt surprisingly heavy, cool against his fingers. Sarah spun around, her eyes wide, then narrowed. She snatched the dress from his hand, her cheeks coloring a deep pink. "It's for Megan's bachelorette party, Mark. Everyone's going all out." Her voice had an edge he hadn't anticipated. She smoothed the dress protectively, laying it back in the suitcase. "Brian's paying for Megan's whole trip," she said, her tone softening, a wistful quality entering her voice. "Every single detail. Flights, the hotel suite. Everything. It's so nice. Remember our honeymoon? That little cabin upstate?" A shadow crossed her face, a fleeting expression of something akin to regret. Mark felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a dull ache that seemed to settle just beneath his ribs. Their modest wedding, the quiet cabin, it had been all they could afford. He had thought it was enough. "Dad, pancakes?" Ben, their 6-year-old, burst into the room, his voice bright, shattering the quiet tension. The moment evaporated, leaving behind only the lingering scent of Sarah's new perfume and the unspoken weight of her unfinished comparison. Mark, elbow-deep in a demanding project at the architectural firm, had been spending late nights in his home office. The lines on his face deepened with fatigue. He'd barely registered Sarah's sudden interest in the gym, the new clothes that had started appearing in her wardrobe, the extra time spent on her hair and makeup. He'd dismissed it as a woman's natural desire to feel good about herself. A harmless resurgence of vanity. His mind was on structural integrity. On deadlines, Sarah's phone, a new model he hadn't paid much attention to, buzzed almost constantly from the nightstand. Each time, she would pick it up quickly, her thumb flying across the screen, then tuck it away, a small, private smile playing on her lips. Mark noted the action, the swiftness, the subtle shift in her expression, but failed to connect any dots. He was too tired. "I really can't get away, Sarah," Mark said later, explaining for the third time why Vegas was impossible. "This downtown development is a monster. I'm practically sleeping at the office." Ben, perched on a kitchen stool, listening, his lower lip began to tremble. Mark felt a familiar pang of guilt, a sense of falling short. He tried to soften the blow with a promise of a fishing trip. Just the two of them. In a few weeks. By 10 o'clock, Sarah was ready. She walked into the living room, a vision in designer jeans Mark didn't recognize. A fine cashmere sweater he certainly hadn't bought, and those infamous red-soled heels that clicked with sharp authority on the hardwood floor. Her hair was styled perfectly, a glossy cascade around her shoulders. She looked expensive. She looked like a woman who had somewhere very specific to be. A sleek black luxury SUV pulled into their driveway, its tinted windows gleaming in the late morning sun. "Jessica arranged it," Sarah said, picking up her oversized leather tote, her eyes carefully avoiding Mark's. She really outdid herself. He walked her to the curb. Their goodbye kiss was brief, A brush of lips, perfunctory. The warmth, the familiar comfort, was absent. Ben stood on the porch, waving frantically, a small figure filled with unadulterated excitement for his mother's departure. Mark watched the SUV pull away, its engine a low hum, merging seamlessly into the street traffic. He watched until it turned the corner and disappeared, taking with it the last normal moment of his marriage. 865 words, Part 2/9. Part 2. The Vegas Unraveling. Day 1 of Sarah's trip proceeded without incident. She texted Mark upon landing and sent photos of their hotel suite. A FaceTime call with Ben before bed concluded the first day. Day 2, however, brought a noticeable shift in her communication. Sarah's messages became sporadic and notably vague. Her final text was a group photo from the Bachelorette party. Sarah in the red dress, looking unfamiliar. Mark, unable to sleep, zoomed in on the photo, observing Megan's arm draped possessively over Sarah. He called Sarah around midnight, but the call went straight to voicemail. A text he sent was delivered, but remained unread until 4:37 a.m. Vegas time. The next morning, Mark's phone buzzed with a barrage of notifications. Sarah had been tagged in numerous photos from the previous night. His stomach tightened as he scrolled through typical party shots, then more disturbing images. He paused on a photo. Sarah, in the red dress, dancing on a private stage. The caption read, "What happens in Vegas with a devil emoji?" Comments below were filled with fire emojis and suggestive remarks from her friends. Ben's voice, "Daddy, you're burning the toast," pulled Mark from his trance as smoke filled the kitchen. While Ben ate Cheerios, Mark retreated, his phone continuing to buzz with new photos. Each new notification hinted at a story he dreaded to uncover. Day 1 of Sarah's Vegas trip passed with a reassuring normalcy. A text arrived the moment her plane touched down, confirming safe arrival. Later that afternoon, a flurry of photos appeared. The opulent hotel suite, a view of the strip from their balcony, a few selfies of Sarah with Megan and the other bridesmaids, all of them smiling, a glass of something sparkling in their hands. Before Ben's bedtime, Sarah FaceTimed, her voice bright, almost giddy. She asked about his day, listened patiently to his excited recounting of a new Lego creation, and promised to bring him a souvenir. Mark watched Ben wave goodbye, feeling a faint sense of relief. It seemed, for now, that everything was fine. Day 2, however, brought a subtle but definite shift. Her messages became less frequent, more abbreviated. "Busy, lol," one read. Another simply stated, "Having fun." The detailed accounts of their activities, the cheerful banter, evaporated. Mark found himself checking his phone more often, the screen cool beneath his thumb, a growing sense of unease coiling in his gut. The last text came late that evening, a group photo. Sarah was front and center, encased in that red sequin dress. She looked different, unfamiliar. Her hair was wilder, her smile broader, almost reckless. Her eyes, usually so soft, gleamed with an intensity Mark had never seen. She looked less like his wife and more like a character in a movie, vibrant and a little dangerous. Sleep felt impossible. The house was too quiet, the silence pressing in on him. He lay in bed, the glow of his phone illuminating the ceiling, zooming in on the photo. His thumb swiped across the screen, magnifying Sarah's face, then the faces of her friends. He noticed Megan's arm draped over Sarah's shoulder, a gesture that seemed a little too tight, a little too possessive for mere friendship. The image held him captive, a loop playing in his mind. Around midnight, Vegas time, he called her. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. He tried again, with the same result. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He typed out a quick text. "Everything okay? Call me when you can." The message delivered, a small checkmark appearing beside it, but the second checkmark, indicating it had been read, never appeared, not until 4:37 a.m., according to the timestamp, hours after he finally drifted into a fitful sleep. The next morning, the insistent buzzing of his phone dragged him from the shallow depths of his sleep. Notifications piled up on the lock screen, each one a fresh stab of anxiety. Sarah had been tagged multiple times. Mark's stomach clenched. He unlocked the phone, his finger trembling slightly as he opened the social media app. He scrolled, his breath catching in his throat. The initial photos were what he might expect from a bachelorette party. Women laughing, clinking champagne glasses, posing in front of casino signs. Then, the images began to shift. Shots of them at a crowded bar, Sarah laughing with a man he didn't recognize, her hand on his arm. Another of her dancing on a tabletop, her head thrown back, hair flying. Each photo seemed to chip away at the fragile composure he'd tried to maintain. He stopped, his thumb frozen above the screen. It was a picture of Sarah, still in the red dress, her body arched, silhouetted against a neon glow. She was on a small, elevated stage, arms thrown wide, bathed in what looked like a spotlight. The caption read, "What happens in Vegas?" followed by a single, grinning devil emoji. Below it, the comments section was a torrent of fire emojis, playful taunts, and suggestive remarks from her friends. "Go, girl. You tell him. Hope he knows what he's missing." The words blurred into a sick symphony of betrayal. "Daddy, you're burning the toast." Ben's voice, high and insistent, sliced through the quiet. A plume of acrid smoke billowed from the toaster oven, filling the kitchen with the smell of scorched bread. Mark flinched, the phone almost slipping from his grasp. He moved quickly, yanking the plug, waving his hand frantically at the smoke detector, while Ben, oblivious, crunched happily on a bowl of Cheerios. Mark retreated to the back porch, the cold morning air doing little to clear his head. His phone vibrated again, a relentless summons. More notifications, more tagged photos, each one a fresh piece of a puzzle he desperately didn't want to solve. A story unfolding he knew would lead to heartbreak. 869 words. Part 3/9. Part 3. The digital deeper dive. Mark continued scrolling through Sarah's tagged photos, piecing together the timeline. The captions grew increasingly explicit, detailing a night of escalating revelry. He spotted a photo of Sarah in close proximity with a man whose face was partially obscured. A gut-wrenching video clip then appeared, showing Sarah dancing provocatively. The man's hand rested on her lower back, a bottle of expensive champagne visible. Mark noticed blatant inconsistencies between Sarah's earlier vague messages and the photo timestamps. He discovered a direct message thread between Sarah and Megan, hinting at shared secrets. A wave of nausea washed over Mark as he finally recognized the man. Brian, Megan's fiancé. He remembered Sarah's past defensiveness about Brian's generosity. Her wistful tone. The luxury SUV. Mark texted Megan, feigning concern for Sarah, hoping to elicit a revealing response. Megan's evasive reply solidified Mark's growing certainty. This was no wild night. It was a calculated betrayal involving her best friend's partner. Methodically, Mark began to gather screenshots, creating a cold, hard ledger of evidence. He locked himself in his study, the phone clutched tight, the quiet house amplifying his internal chaos. The glow of the phone screen was a harsh, unforgiving light in the early morning dimness of the house. Mark continued to scroll, his thumb moving with a numb, mechanical precision. Each swipe brought a new image. A fresh piece of the mosaic of Sarah's night. The progression was clear, a timeline unfurling in lurid detail. From the initial group photos with forced smiles, to increasingly candid shots of laughter, then dancing, then something else entirely. The captions, written by her friends, echoed the escalating indulgence. Vegas baby, living it up. And finally, the pointed, "What happens in Vegas?" Then he saw it. A photo, taken at an awkward angle, zoomed in, slightly blurry. Sarah, in the red dress, was pressed intimately close to a man. His back was mostly to the camera, but his arm was around her waist. His hand splayed low on her hip. His face was turned away, partially obscured by Sarah's hair. But it was clear enough to tell it wasn't a random face from the crowd. It was someone familiar. Mark felt a cold dread begin to seep into his bones. A video clip followed, loading slowly, buffering. When it finally played, the muted sounds of a thumping bass line filled the silence of the room. Sarah was on what looked like a small, private stage in a dimly lit club. She was dancing, her movements fluid and uninhibited, almost provocative. The man from the photo was there again, behind her, his hand resting on the small of her back, his fingers just brushing the curve of her spine. A waiter, unseen, poured a stream of golden liquid from an expensive-looking champagne bottle into crystal flutes. The scene was raw, undeniable. Mark's stomach clenched, a wave of pure nausea rising in his throat. He had to clench his jaw to keep it down. He scrolled back through Sarah's texts, comparing them to the timestamps on the photos. Her message, having an early night, exhausted, sent around 11 p.m. Vegas time, starkly contrasted with photos timestamped 3 a.m., 3:45 a.m., and even 4:10 a.m., showing her still very much in the thick of the party, her energy seemingly inexhaustible. The deliberate obfuscation was a punch to the gut. She hadn't just been having fun. She had actively, consciously lied. He found a direct message thread with Megan. It was short, a brief exchange from the night before, following the more explicit photos. "You're being a bad girl," Megan had written, followed by a winking emoji. Sarah's reply: "Don't tell. Just stories for when you get back. LOL." The complicity was sickening. A shared secret between two women, one of whom was supposedly Mark's best friend. Then, the recognition hit him, like a physical blow. The angle, the distinctive set of the man's jawline, the expensive watch on his wrist, which now seemed so familiar. It was Brian, Megan's fiancé. The realization was a sickening thud, draining all the air from Mark's lungs. Brian, the man who was paying for Megan's entire Bachelorette trip, the man Sarah had mentioned with that wistful tone, comparing him to their modest wedding, the luxurious SUV that had picked her up. All the pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of betrayal far deeper and more insidious than he could have imagined. He remembered Sarah's almost defensive tone when discussing Brian's generosity, the fleeting expression of hurt on her face when she'd brought up their own humble beginnings. He had dismissed it. Then, now, it replayed in his mind. Each word, a venomous echo. He had been so blind, so stupid. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He composed a text to Megan, a carefully constructed message, feigning concern. "Hey, is Sarah okay? Haven't heard much from her since last night. Hope you guys are having fun." He waited. His breath held. Megan's reply came quickly, almost too quickly. "Yeah, she's great, just having a blast. Talk soon." No details, no offer to put Sarah on the phone. Evasive. Too evasive. It wasn't just a wild night. It was a calculated betrayal, involving her best friend's partner. The cold certainty settled in. Mark started gathering screenshots, a methodical act that staved off the crushing emotional chaos. Each image, each incriminating caption, each timestamp, was meticulously saved. The vague unease had given way to an undeniable, crushing certainty. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act. He finally stood, his legs stiff, his back aching. He walked to his study, the small, seldom-used room that was usually filled with blueprints and design sketches. He locked the door, a click echoing loudly in the quiet house. He sank into his desk chair, the phone still clutched tight in his hand, its cool surface a stark contrast to the burning inferno in his mind. The silence of the house amplified the chaotic roar in his head. 888 words. Part 4, 9ths. Part 4. The inevitable. Return. And strained peace. Sarah's flight home experienced a delay. Mark canceled the luxury car service he'd previously arranged. He decided to pick her up from the airport himself. At the gate, he watched Sarah approach. Visibly tired but with a brittle, forced cheerfulness, she attempted to hug him, but Mark's embrace was stiff and unresponsive. His eyes meticulously searched her face for any trace of guilt or remorse. "Rough trip?" Mark asked, his voice flat, causing Sarah to flinch slightly. Ben, excited, ran to Sarah, asking, "Mommy, did you see a tiger?" Sarah knelt, offering a rehearsed and slightly evasive answer about a different hotel. In the car, Sarah chattered endlessly about the upcoming wedding, Megan, and Brian. Her voice was a little too loud, her stories overly detailed, almost performative. Mark drove in silence, each of Sarah's words a fresh jab to his wounded pride. Every glance at her profile was a stark reminder of the photos he'd seen. He noticed the infamous red sequin dress, folded neatly, a silent testament to her lies. At home, Sarah tried to restore normalcy, preparing Ben's favorite dinner. Yet, the air between them remained thick, with a profound, unspoken tension. Mark observed her, seeing her through a new, deeply painful lens, a stranger in his own home. Later that night, Sarah finally asked, "Is everything all right, Mark?" "You've been quiet." Mark merely nodded, the words trapped, unable to form. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of Sarah and Brian burned into his mind's eye. Sarah's flight home was delayed, a final, weary drag on the long weekend. Mark, receiving the notification, felt a grim satisfaction. He canceled the luxury car service he had, out of habit, scheduled for her return. There would be no convenient, anonymous pickup. He would go himself. The drive to the airport was silent, the hum of the engine a dull counterpoint to the thrumming in his head. He stood near the arrival gate, a casual observer in a sea of expectant faces. He saw her first, emerging from the jet bridge, a small suitcase rolling behind her. She looked tired, the glamour of the red dress replaced by the practicalities of travel. But there was still a brittle, almost desperate cheerfulness radiating from her, like a shield. Her eyes scanned the crowd, found him, and a forced smile bloomed on her face. She moved towards him, shedding the cheerfulness, reaching out for a hug. Mark allowed it, his arms stiff, his embrace unresponsive. He held her loosely, his chin just above her head, his eyes searching her face, tracing the lines of fatigue, looking for any flicker of guilt. Any trace of remorse. There was none. Just the practiced smile, the tired eyes. "Rough trip?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of any real curiosity. The words hung in the air, a blunt instrument. Sarah flinched, a small, almost imperceptible tremor that ran through her. Before she could answer, Ben burst through the small crowd, his 6-year-old energy boundless. "Mommy, did you see a tiger? Did you go to the tiger place?" He wrapped his small arms around her legs, his face upturned, beaming. Sarah knelt, her movements a little stiff, pulling Ben into a hug. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. "That was a different hotel, a different kind of trip. But I brought you something." She glanced up at Mark, a quick, almost nervous dart of her eyes, before refocusing on Ben. In the car, the silence was broken by Sarah's incessant chatter. She talked about the wedding plans, about Megan, about Brian. Her voice was a little too loud, her stories a little too detailed. A meticulous recreation of a weekend that felt like a carefully constructed performance. "Oh, Brian was so generous," she exclaimed, for the second time, recounting an anecdote about a lavish dinner. "He's just the sweetest guy, always thinking of others." Each word was a fresh jab, each phrase a new cut to Mark's already raw nerves. He drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road, every glance at her profile in the passenger seat a stark, unwelcome reminder of the images burned into his mind. When he reached for her suitcase in the trunk, he saw it, folded neatly at the top of her packed clothes. A defiant splash of scarlet against the muted fabrics was the red sequin dress. It lay there, a silent, glittering testament to the lie she had lived, the truth she had hidden. At home, Sarah tried to resume normalcy. She moved through the house with a determined cheerfulness, making Ben's favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese from scratch. A task she usually delegated. The familiar aroma filled the kitchen, but it couldn't dispel the chill in the air, the thick, unspoken tension that permeated every corner of their home. Mark watched her, seeing her through a new, painful lens. Her every gesture, every movement, seemed alien. She was a stranger, moving through his home, occupying the space where his wife once had been. Later that night, after Ben was finally asleep, the house once again fell into a heavy quiet. Sarah, perched on the edge of the bed, finally broke the silence. "Is everything all right, Mark?" she asked, her voice softer now, tinged with a fragile uncertainty. "You've been quiet since I got back." He just nodded, unable to form words. His throat felt tight, constricted, as if a hand was wrapped around it. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. He couldn't speak without unleashing the storm. He just shook his head slightly and turned away. He lay awake for hours, staring at the shadowed ceiling, the persistent image of Sarah in Brian's arms, bathed in the lurid glow of the Vegas night, burning itself deeper into his mind. 889 words. Part 5, 9th. Part 5. The Confrontation. The next morning, Mark found Sarah's phone on the kitchen counter. Notifications from Megan and Brian glowed on the screen. After a moment of hesitation, Mark picked up the phone. He quickly located a deleted message thread between Sarah and Brian. The messages were explicit, unequivocally confirming their affair. They expressed a desire to meet again and praised how worth it Vegas had been. Mark, hands shaking, printed out the damning screenshots, a cold resolve settling over him. He waited for Ben to leave for school before calmly calling Sarah into the living room. He gestured to the stack of printed papers lying on the coffee table. "I found this," Mark said, his voice raspy, pushing the evidence towards her. Sarah's face drained of color as she saw the photos and messages. Her initial reaction was one of stunned, terrified silence. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, but her eyes darted away, unable to meet his gaze. "Explain what, Sarah?" The private stage, Brian's hand, the deleted texts. Mark's voice rose, raw with pain. Sarah broke down, confessing to a moment of weakness, blaming alcohol and the atmosphere. Mark saw through her excuses, the blame shifting like sand. "How long?" he asked, his gaze unwavering. "Was it just Vegas? Or?" She admitted to a growing attraction to Brian over months. Nothing physical before Vegas, but a deep emotional connection. "Get out," Mark said, his voice quiet but firm, the command echoing in the stunned silence. The following morning, Mark found Sarah's phone abandoned on the kitchen counter, a small, glowing beacon of dread. Notifications pulsed across the screen. A new text from Megan, another from Brian. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the device, then picked it up. His fingers moved with a practiced ease, unlocking it, his resolve hardening with each tap. He knew where to look. He scrolled through recent messages, then dove into the deleted folder. There it was, a thread between Sarah and Brian. The messages were unequivocal, explicit. They confirmed everything he had feared, everything the photos had hinted at. "I can't stop thinking about you. Vegas was worth every second. When can we do this again?" His hands began to shake, a cold tremor running through him, but his mind was crystal clear. The vague unease was gone, replaced by a devastating, undeniable certainty. He connected Sarah's phone to his printer, the mechanical whir and clack of the machine a stark contrast to the roaring silence in his head. Page after page emerged, a physical manifestation of the betrayal. The photos, the explicit texts, the timestamps, the damning evidence laid bare. He stacked the papers neatly on the kitchen table, a monument to the end of his marriage. He waited for the school bus to pick up Ben, watching through the window as his son's small figure disappeared around the corner. Only then, with the house quiet once more, did he calmly call Sarah into the living room. She appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel, a question in her eyes. Mark didn't speak, just gestured to the stack of papers on the coffee table. A mute accusation. "I found this," Mark said, his voice raspy, raw, barely recognizable as his own. He pushed the stack of printed evidence across the polished wood toward her. Sarah's eyes widened, then her face drained of all color as she saw the images, the words, the irrefutable proof. Her initial reaction was a stunned, terrified silence. She stood frozen, her eyes darting between the papers and Mark's unwavering gaze, like a cornered animal. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. But her eyes wouldn't meet his. They skittered around the room, settling on anything but him. "Explain what, Sarah?" Mark's voice rose, raw with pain and indignation. "The private stage? Brian's hand on your back? The deleted texts? The lies? What is there left to explain?" His hand slammed down on the table, making the papers jump. Sarah broke down, collapsing onto the sofa, her face buried in her hands. Her words were muffled. A torrent of desperate excuses. She confessed to a moment of weakness, blamed the alcohol, the atmosphere, the pressure of the bachelorette party. She blamed everything but herself, but Mark saw through it. The flimsy attempt to shift blame, to minimize the calculated deception. "How long?" he asked, his voice now dangerously quiet, his gaze unwavering, piercing through her pretense. Was it just Vegas? Or... He didn't need to finish the question. The air in the room grew heavy, waiting for the truth. She sniffled, pulling her hands away from her face, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "Not physical," she managed, her voice cracking. "Not before Vegas, but there's been a growing attraction. Over the past few months, an emotional connection. Yes, we talked." He understood me, Mark. Mark felt a cold wave wash over him, extinguishing the last embers of hope. An emotional connection. That was worse, in some ways, than just a physical indiscretion. It spoke of a deeper void, a chasm she had sought to fill with another man. The cold realism of this moment. You might feel the same judgment, the quiet moral tension, in the everyday choices people make. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. "Get out," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet firm, absolute. The two words echoed in the stunned silence of their living room, a final, unyielding command. 885 words. Part 6, 9ths. Part 6. The aftermath and the son. Sarah pleaded, begged for forgiveness, attempting to rationalize her actions. Mark, however, stood unyielding, the betrayal too deep to reconcile. "Think about Ben," she cried, a bitter irony that twisted in Mark's gut. "I am thinking about Ben," Mark retorted, his voice clipped. "And you clearly weren't." He helped her pack a small bag, his movements stiff and detached, as if aiding a stranger. Sarah left, the front door closing with a definitive click, leaving an unnerving silence. Mark called his sister, Jenny, for support, his voice breaking as he recounted the discovery. He agonized over how to explain the situation to Ben, the thought of shattering his son's world crushing him. When Ben returned from school, his innocent question, "Where's Mommy?" tore at Mark's heart. Mark struggled to explain Sarah's absence, vaguely mentioning she needed some time away. He consciously avoided the brutal truth for now, shielding Ben from the immediate pain. Ben sensed the pervasive tension, becoming withdrawn and unusually quiet. His worried eyes frequently observed Mark, seeking answers without asking. The house, once vibrant with the sounds of family life, now felt hollow and suffocating. It was filled with a palpable sense of grief and emptiness. Mark spent sleepless nights on the living room couch, surrounded by the ghosts of their shared life. The weight of a shattered future pressed heavily on his chest. Sarah pleaded, her voice hoarse, tears streaming down her face. She begged for forgiveness, tried to rationalize, to minimize, to explain away the undeniable evidence. She talked about loneliness, about feeling unseen, about the intoxicating freedom of Vegas. But Mark stood unyielding, his face a mask of stone. The betrayal was too deep, too calculated, too deliberate to be dismissed by hurried excuses. Every word felt hollow, another layer of deceit. "Think about Ben," she cried, her voice cracking, reaching out a hand that Mark didn't take. The words were a bitter irony, twisting in his gut. The raw hypocrisy of it burned. "I am thinking about Ben," Mark replied, his voice flat, emotionless. "And you weren't." The last two words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. He helped her pack a small bag, a carry-on size. His movements were stiff, detached, as if he were assisting a stranger at a hotel checkout. He watched her choose a few essentials, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a book. There was no argument, no prolonged discussion. The finality of the moment was chilling. Sarah left, the front door closing with a soft, definitive click that echoed through the unnervingly silent house. The sound was not a bang, not a slam, but a quiet, almost respectful closure. It left behind an emptiness that was deafening. Mark stood in the hallway for a long moment, the silence pressing in on him, before pulling out his phone. He called his sister, Jenny. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a ragged whisper. He recounted the discovery, the photos, the texts, the confession. He felt it crack, breaking under the weight of the raw emotion he had tried so desperately to suppress. Jenny listened, her voice on the other end a steady, comforting presence. His mind immediately shifted to Ben. How to tell him. How to shatter his son's world, without destroying him. The thought of that conversation, of seeing the light dim in Ben's innocent eyes, crushed him. It was a weight far heavier than his own pain. When Ben returned from school, bursting through the door with his usual exuberance, his first question was, "Where's Mommy?" His innocent query, asked with a child's simple expectation, tore at Mark's heart. Mark knelt, forcing a strained smile. "Mommy. Mommy needed some time away, buddy," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He avoided the truth, couldn't bring himself to utter the brutal words that would irrevocably alter his son's understanding of their family. "She's just taking a little break." Ben's brow furrowed, his bright eyes searching Mark's face, sensing the careful omission. Ben, usually a whirlwind of questions and stories after school, became withdrawn, quiet. He moved through the house with a subdued energy, frequently observing Mark with worried, questioning eyes that sought answers his father couldn't yet give. The boy knew something was wrong. The tension in the house as thick and palpable as the silence. The house, once vibrant with the sounds of family life, with Sarah's laughter and Ben's playful shouts, now felt hollow, an empty shell echoing with a profound sense of grief. Every room held ghosts of shared memories, now tainted. Mark spent sleepless nights on the living room couch, the worn fabric offering little comfort, surrounded by the specters of their shared life. The weight of a shattered future, of a family torn asunder, pressed heavily on his chest, making each breath a conscious effort. 888 words. Part 7, 9th. Part 7. Unearthing the full truth. Driven by a desperate need for complete closure, Mark began a meticulous investigation. He methodically scrutinized phone records and bank statements. A pattern of secretive spending emerged. Hotel charges, expensive gifts, dinners, Sarah had called girls' nights. He confronted Megan, who initially deflected, but then tearfully admitted her suspicions. Megan confessed she didn't want to get involved, feeling trapped. She revealed Sarah and Brian's affair had been ongoing for months, escalating subtly. "Brian told me he was leaving me for her, Mark," Megan whispered, utterly devastated. The revelation that her own fiancé had betrayed her with her best friend left Megan broken. Mark confronted Brian, who was smug, unapologetic, and confirmed the affair. Brian claimed he felt trapped in his relationship with Megan, seeking an escape. The full extent of the calculated deception, the depth of the lies, and the premeditated nature of the affair sickened Mark. He realized Sarah had been actively planning a new life with Brian. The Vegas trip had merely served as a cynical cover and a catalyst for their public declaration. He discovered a secret apartment lease application in Sarah's name, confirming her intent to leave. The pain of betrayal deepened, shifting from initial shock to a cold, burning anger at their callousness. Mark fully grasped that Sarah had been actively disengaging from their marriage for months, meticulously planning her escape. He began to compile all the collected evidence, not just for personal understanding, but for the looming divorce. The silence in the house, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator, drove Mark to action. His need for complete closure, for every ugly truth, became a consuming force. He started to investigate, not with a frantic anger, but with a cold, methodical precision, like an architect dissecting a flawed blueprint. He checked phone records, cross-referenced bank statements, sifting through months of digital breadcrumbs. A clear pattern began to emerge. Discrete hotel charges on Sarah's credit card, paid for by Brian's company account. Expensive gifts that Mark had never seen. Dinners out, often at upscale restaurants, that Sarah had always attributed to girls' nights with Megan and the others. The lies, small at first, then growing in audacity, were now illuminated in the stark light of evidence. His stomach churned. He called Megan, arranging to meet at a neutral coffee shop. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed, a mirror of his own pain. At first, she deflected, stammering excuses, avoiding his gaze. But Mark pushed, relentlessly, calmly laying out the facts. Eventually, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted she had suspected something, seen the glances, the private jokes, the hushed conversations. "I didn't want to get involved, Mark," she whispered, her voice raw, laced with guilt and shame. I just thought it was a phase." Then, the true blow. Megan choked out the words, "Brian told me he was leaving me for her, Mark." Her voice was barely audible, a broken whisper. "He told me he loved her. He said it was over between us." The raw, guttural sob that escaped her was a testament to her utter devastation. Her own fiancé. Her best friend. The double betrayal was sickening. Armed with this fresh, crushing information, Mark knew he had to confront Brian. He called him, a quiet urgency in his tone, arranging a meeting at Brian's office. Brian, impeccably dressed, sat across from him, annoyingly smug, entirely unapologetic. He confirmed the affair, a casual nod to the Vegas weekend. "Megan and I haven't been happy for a long time," Brian stated, his voice flat, devoid of any genuine emotion. "I felt trapped. Sarah understands me." He spoke as if it were a simple transaction, a logical decision, oblivious to the human wreckage he was leaving in his wake. The full extent of the calculated deception, the depth of the lies, the premeditated nature of their affair, sickened Mark. It wasn't a moment of weakness, not a mistake. It was a conscious, deliberate plan, executed with callous disregard for anyone but themselves. Sarah hadn't merely fallen. She had walked away. Step by calculated step. Then, buried within Sarah's personal files on their shared cloud drive, Mark found it. An apartment lease application. In Sarah's name. A place across town, set to begin a month from now. It was the final, undeniable proof. She had been planning a new life with Brian, using the Vegas trip not just as a cover, but as a catalyst, the dramatic flourish to a story she had already written. The pain of betrayal, which had been a dull ache, now intensified, shifting from shock to a cold, burning anger. It was an anger born of their sheer callousness, their utter disregard for his feelings, for Ben, for their shared life. He realized, with gut-wrenching clarity, that Sarah had been actively disengaging from their marriage for months, meticulously planning her escape, constructing a new reality for herself, while he remained oblivious, caught in the illusion of their life together. He began compiling all the evidence, the screenshots, the bank statements, the phone records, the lease application. Not just for his own understanding, but for the looming divorce proceedings. He would need every scrap of proof. 892 words. Part 8/9. Part 8. The legal and emotional toll. Mark filed for divorce, initiating a grim, clinical process. The legal proceedings systematically stripped bare the remains of his marriage. His initial conversation with Ben was profoundly heartbreaking. Mark gently explained that Mommy and Daddy would no longer live together. Ben cried, confused and scared, asking if it was his fault, a question that crushed Mark. Sarah attempted to garner sympathy from mutual friends, portraying Mark as controlling. She painted him as distant, but the overwhelming evidence of her affair slowly began to leak out. She faced swift social ostracism, as friends chose sides, most gravitating towards Mark and Megan. They were appalled by the brazen betrayal, severing ties with Sarah. Custody battles ensued, with Sarah initially fighting for full custody. She eventually backed down when confronted with Mark's overwhelming evidence against her. The financial strain of legal fees and supporting Ben alone weighed heavily on Mark. Sarah eventually moved in with Brian, their new relationship quickly tarnished by the circumstances. Public judgment became a constant shadow over their lives. Mark experienced waves of anger, grief, and profound sadness, seeking therapy to navigate the complex emotions. He struggled immensely with the concept of forgiveness, especially for the pain inflicted upon Ben. Megan became an unexpected ally, as they both tried to rebuild their lives. They supported each other through the shared trauma of betrayal. The price became tangible. Lost reputation, fractured relationships, and deep, inescapable regret. Mark filed for divorce, a process so grim and clinical, it felt less like ending a marriage and more like dissecting a cadaver. Lawyers spoke in detached legal terms, discussing assets and liabilities, custody schedules, and property division. Each document, each signature, stripped bare another layer of their shared life, revealing the hollow remains of what once was. The hardest part, by far, was telling Ben. He sat his son down, his voice gentle, careful, as he explained that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living together anymore. Ben's small face crumpled. He cried, confused and scared, his innocent questions tearing at Mark's soul. "Is it my fault, Daddy? Did I do something wrong?" The words were a knife twist, a devastating blow that left Mark breathless with pain and a fresh surge of anger at Sarah. He held Ben tight, promising him, again and again, that it was not his fault, that he was loved. Sarah, meanwhile, embarked on a campaign to gain sympathy from their mutual friends. She painted Mark as controlling, emotionally distant, blaming him for the breakdown of their marriage. But the evidence of her affair, the photos, the texts, Megan's tearful confession, slowly, inexorably, leaked out. The truth, cold and unyielding, spread through their social circles. The reaction was swift and decisive. Sarah faced social ostracism. Friends, acquaintances, even casual contacts, chose sides. Most gravitated towards Mark and Megan, appalled by the blatant betrayal. Invitations stopped coming for Sarah. Calls went unanswered. Silent judgments passed in supermarket aisles. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of public opinion. Custody battles ensued, protracted and emotionally draining. Sarah, through her lawyer, initially fought for full custody, attempting to paint Mark as an unstable, emotionally compromised parent. But Mark was prepared. He presented the overwhelming evidence he had painstakingly gathered. The phone records, the texts, the detailed timestamps, Megan's sworn statement. Faced with such irrefutable proof of her affair and blatant deception, Sarah eventually backed down, conceding to Mark having primary custody. The financial strain was immense. Legal fees piled up, a constant, draining hemorrhage. Supporting Ben alone, maintaining the house, all while navigating the emotional wreckage, weighed heavily on Mark. He worked longer hours, took on extra projects, pushing himself to the brink, driven by the need to provide stability for his son. Sarah eventually moved in with Brian, their new relationship born of infidelity and public scandal. It was quickly tarnished, not just by the circumstances of its beginning, but by the pervasive judgment that followed them. Their happiness, if it existed, was muted, shadowed by the cost of their choices. Mark experienced waves of anger so profound it left him trembling, followed by deep, crushing grief, and then a profound sadness for what they had lost, for the life he had once envisioned. He started seeing a therapist, a stoic man who listened patiently as Mark navigated the complex, churning emotions. He struggled immensely with the concept of forgiveness, particularly for how Sarah and Brian had hurt Ben, how they had irrevocably altered his son's childhood. In the midst of this chaos, Megan became an unexpected ally. They met regularly, not as ex-spouses of the same betrayers, but as two individuals trying to rebuild their lives. They offered each other a strange, shared comfort, a mutual understanding of a very specific kind of trauma. The price was now tangible, etched into their lives: lost reputation, fractured relationships, and a deep, inescapable regret that would likely follow Sarah and Brian for years to come. 892 words. Part 9/9. Part 9. A New Horizon. Living with the moral consequences. 2 years had passed since the divorce, establishing a new rhythm for Mark and Ben. Their quiet home had become a sanctuary of comfort and stability. Ben was thriving in school and with friends, yet a subtle sadness lingered within him. Mark, though scarred by the betrayal, found a semblance of hard-won peace. His focus remained squarely on his son and his architectural work. He occasionally spotted Sarah and Brian around town, their appearance drawn, their relationship strained. Sarah made attempts to reconnect with Ben more genuinely, but her visits were often awkward and infrequent. Mark observed their new life, noting the visible struggles in Sarah and Brian's relationship. Their bond seemed plagued by the guilt of their actions and the suspicion born from their own betrayal. Brian eventually lost his job due to the lingering scandal, plunging their financial situation into precarity. This forced them to move to a smaller, more anonymous town, away from their past. Sarah, in turn, began to understand the true, profound cost of her choices. She had lost her family, her home, her social standing, and her own peace of mind. There was no dramatic revenge for Mark, only the quiet, persistent grind of everyday consequences. The heavy burden of her actions became Sarah's inescapable reality. Mark, cautiously, had learned to trust again, dedicating himself to being the best father possible. He reflected on betrayal's insidious nature, how it erodes everything, and the immense strength required to rebuild. The story culminates with Mark and Ben building a Lego set, symbolizing their imperfect but whole rebuilt life. 2 years passed. The sharp edges of grief had dulled, replaced by the persistent, quieter ache of memory. Mark and Ben had established a new routine, a comfortable rhythm to their days that hummed beneath the surface of their lives. Their home, once filled with the ghosts of a broken family, was now a sanctuary, quiet but stable. Ben was thriving. He excelled in school, had a close group of friends, and his laughter, genuine and unrestrained, echoed through the house more often than not. Yet, Mark noticed a subtle sadness in his son's eyes sometimes, a quiet awareness of the fractured family, an understanding far beyond his years. Ben didn't ask about his mother much anymore, but the unspoken questions lingered in the air between them. Mark, though scarred, had found a semblance of peace, a hard-won quiet within himself. He focused on his son, on his demanding architectural work, pouring his energy into creation rather than destruction. The anger had mostly faded, replaced by a weary acceptance. He occasionally saw Sarah and Brian around town, usually at the grocery store or a gas station. They looked drawn, their faces etched with a fatigue that seemed deeper than mere sleeplessness. The once passionate affair, he observed, had settled into a strained reality, a public spectacle they were forced to inhabit. There was a palpable tension between them, a lack of the easy affection Mark remembered seeing in the early days of their deception. Sarah attempted to reconnect with Ben more genuinely, but her visits were often awkward, infused with an air of artificial cheerfulness. They were infrequent, always scheduled, never spontaneous, and always brief. Ben went along with it, polite but reserved, a wall of quiet composure separating him from his mother. Mark overheard snippets of gossip, saw the subtle shifts in social dynamics. Brian, unable to escape the whispers and the professional fallout from the scandal, eventually lost his job at the firm. Their financial situation became precarious, forcing them to sell their house and move to a smaller town an hour away, seeking a fresh start in anonymity. The quiet judgment of their former community followed them like a shadow. Sarah, Mark realized, was truly paying the price. She had lost her family, her home, her social standing. Her once vibrant confidence was replaced by a visible weariness, a gnawing regret. Her peace of mind had been sacrificed on the altar of a selfish choice. There was no grand revenge, no dramatic confrontation for Mark. Just the quiet, persistent grind of everyday consequences. The slow, heavy burden of her actions. It was a quieter, more insidious form of suffering than any Mark could have inflicted. Mark had learned to trust again, cautiously, deliberately. He dedicated himself to being the best father he could be. A constant, unwavering presence for Ben. He reflected on the insidious nature of betrayal, how it didn't just break hearts, but eroded everything it touched. Trust, reputation, stability. Rebuilding took immense strength, immeasurable patience, and an enduring belief in the possibility of new foundations. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, sunlight streaming through the living room window, Mark sat on the rug with Ben, their heads bent over a half-built Lego spaceship. Pieces clicked together, one by one, forming a new structure, imperfect in its construction, but whole. It was a tangible symbol of their rebuilt life, strong enough to withstand the winds of the past. 889 words. Conclusion. 2 years on, the dust had settled, revealing the changed landscape of Mark's life. The initial fury had cooled, leaving behind a tempered resolve and a deeper understanding of human fragility. He found comfort in the steady rhythm of raising Ben, in the shared laughter over a silly joke, The quiet moments of reading together. Ben, resilient as only children can be, thrived under his father's unwavering love, a testament to the strength found in unconditional care. Sarah and Brian had vanished from their immediate orbit, absorbed into the consequences of their own making. Mark rarely thought of them anymore, the past a distant echo rather than a present pain. He learned that some wounds heal, leaving scars, while others become a constant, quiet burden for those who inflict them. His own journey had been one of rebuilding, piece by painstaking piece. Much like the Lego models he now constructed with Ben, their new life, forged from the wreckage of betrayal, was imperfect, but it was theirs, strong and whole. The end. YouTube SEO package. Language style. Natural, rural, Midwestern American English. Titles. CTR. Optimized title. The Vegas Trip That Broke Us. A Story of Affair, Discovery, and Crushing Marriage. Betrayal. SEO optimized title. Midwestern Wife Cheating. Caught. A sad audio story of family heartbreak and moral consequences. Compelling and smooth title. He knew something was wrong. The truth behind a family betrayal and its real cost. Descriptions. First description, 50 words. This heartbreaking affair story plunges into the quiet devastations of infidelity in a small town. Witness a family torn apart by betrayal, where every choice has a profound cost. See characters ultimately pay the price for their actions in this gut-wrenching tale of lost trust. Second description, 150 words. This isn't just another sad audio story. It's a deep dive into the human heart, exploring the difficult choices people make and the ripple effects they create. From initial suspicions to the painful truth, we follow Mark as his world crumbles. The story quietly examines the thin line between right and wrong, the complex layers of morality, and the heavy consequences that follow a hidden, cheating heart. Every whispered word and every discovered secret brings us closer to understanding the devastating impact on an innocent family. Join us for a powerful narrative that feels all too real, reminding us that some wounds run deeper than words can express, and the echoes of betrayal linger long after the initial storm. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the long road to healing after profound deceit. Timestamps. 0. The first crack in the pavement. Subtle shifts. 5:30. Vegas. Unraveling. Marital betrayal. Begins to surface. Dramedy. SPP. 11. The Digital Trail. Uncovering the Truth. 1630. The Gut Punch. Confirmation of Infidelity. Fallout. 22. Home, but not home. The Strained Reunion. 27-30. The Reckoning. Confronting Cheating. 33-0. Shattered Lives. The Family Heartbreak Unfolds. 38-30. Picking Up the Pieces. Facing. Paying the Price of Deceit. 44-0. A New Horizon. Living with the Moral Consequences. Hashtags. Number Sad Audio Story. Number Affair Story. Number Family Betrayal. Number Infidelity Consequences. Number Midwestern Drama. Number Broken Trust. Keywords. 20 popular. Affair. Betrayal. Infidelity. Cheating. Consequences. Family drama. Marriage problems. Broken trust. Sad story. Emotional story. Relationship issues. Moral dilemma. Hidden secrets. Discovery of affair. Heartbroken. Truth revealed. Real life story. Drama. Difficult choices. Life lessons. Conclusion. 2 years on, the dust had settled, revealing the changed landscape of Mark's life. The initial fury had cooled, leaving behind a tempered resolve and a deeper understanding of human fragility. He found comfort in the steady rhythm of raising Ben, in the shared laughter over a silly joke, the quiet moments of reading together. Ben, resilient as only children can be, thrived under his father's unwavering love, a testament to the strength found in unconditional care. Sarah and Brian had vanished from their immediate orbit, absorbed into the consequences of their own making. Mark rarely thought of them anymore. The past a distant echo rather than a present pain. He learned that some wounds heal, leaving scars, while others become a constant, quiet burden for those who inflict them. His own journey had been one of rebuilding, piece by painstaking piece, much like the Lego models he now constructed with Ben. Their new life, forged from the wreckage of betrayal, was imperfect. But it was theirs, strong and whole. The end.